In 1994, a Kurdish shepherd was walking through a field in southern Turkey when his foot hit something hard beneath the soil. He kicked the dirt away and found a carved stone pillar. He reported it to the local museum. Archaeologists arrived, and what they uncovered over the next 3 decades has quietly destroyed the timeline of human civilization. Not challenged it, not complicated it, destroyed it. Göbekli Tepe is a complex of stone circles built 11,600 years ago. That is the official date, confirmed, peer-reviewed, accepted by mainstream archaeology. The pillars weigh between 10 and 20 tons each. Some exceed 6 meters in height. They are covered in carved reliefs of animals, executed with a precision and artistic sophistication that rivals anything produced thousands of years later. And they were built by people who, according to every textbook written before 1994, did not exist. Hunter-gatherers with no agriculture, no permanent settlements, no social organization complex enough to quarry, transport, and erect 20-ton stone pillars. The lead archaeologist who excavated the site, Klaus Schmidt, spent 20 years digging. Before he died, he said one thing publicly that nobody in mainstream archaeology has been able to answer. He said, "This changes everything." Then he died, and everything stayed exactly the same. If you want to understand what Göbekli Tepe actually is, who built it, and why the answer has been kept out of every history book you have ever read, subscribe. I cover suppressed archaeology every week. Now let's go into what they actually found. Here is what mainstream archaeology tells you about Göbekli Tepe. Around 11,600 years ago, hunter-gatherers in what is now southeastern Turkey built a series of circular stone enclosures on a hilltop. They quarried limestone from nearby outcroppings, shaped it into T-shaped pillars, decorated those pillars with animal carvings, and arranged them in precise circles. Then, around 8,000 years ago, they deliberately buried the entire complex under thousands of tons of soil and walked away. That's the story. Here is what the story requires you to accept. It requires you to accept that people with no writing, no metal tools, no wheels, no agriculture, and no permanent settlements coordinated the quarrying and transportation of stones weighing up to 20 tons across terrain that modern engineers would find challenging. It requires you to accept that these same people developed artistic skills sophisticated enough to carve detailed reliefs of foxes, lions, vultures, and scorpions on those pillars. Skills that archaeologists previously believed took thousands of years of cultural development to achieve. It requires you to accept that they built something so significant, so sacred, so important to them that they then buried it completely and never came back. And it requires you to accept that this happened 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 5,500 years before the first Egyptian pyramid, 5,000 years before the invention of writing. All of that is the official position. Now, here is what the official position cannot explain. The site covers at least 300 acres. Geophysical surveys have identified more than 200 pillars still buried underground. Archaeologists have excavated less than 5% of the total site in 30 years of work. This is not a small ritual space built by a wandering group of hunter-gatherers. This is a construction project of monumental scale that required a permanent, organized, well-fed workforce operating over an extended period of time. Where did their food come from? Hunter-gatherers follow their food. They don't stay in one place long enough to build something like this. The official answer is that Göbekli Tepe may have caused the agricultural revolution rather than followed it. That people gathered here for ritual purposes, and the need to feed those gatherings drove the development of farming. That is a theory offered to save a timeline that doesn't work. Let's look at what the textbooks don't tell you. The T-shaped pillars at Göbekli Tepe are not random stone blocks. They are anthropomorphic. They represent beings. Each pillar has arms carved along its sides, hands carved at the front, and a belt carved around what would be a waist. These pillars are stylized humanoid figures, beings rendered in stone, standing in circles, facing inward toward a central pair of larger pillars. The two central pillars in enclosure D are the largest on the site. They stand over 5.5 meters tall and weigh an estimated 15 to 20 tons each. They face each other across the center of the circle, and carved on their surfaces are not just animals. There are carved hands, carved clothing, carved symbols that appear nowhere else in the known archaeological record. These are not primitive stick figures scratched by people who didn't know what they were doing. The carving technique, the depth of relief, the anatomical accuracy of the animals, vulture wings spread mid-flight, a boar mid-charge, a lion in three-quarter view, all of this requires a level of artistic training and cultural tradition that doesn't appear from nowhere. You don't just wake up one morning and carve a technically precise image of a vulture on a 20-ton limestone pillar. You learn that from someone who learned it from someone else. There is a tradition behind this, a lineage of knowledge. Where is that lineage? We don't have it. There is nothing before Göbekli Tepe that explains Göbekli Tepe. Now let's talk about the astronomy. Researchers at Edinburgh University analyzed the positions of the animal carvings on the pillars and found that they encode specific star positions. The vulture on pillar 43, the most famous carved stone at the site, appears to depict the sky as it appeared on the summer solstice of 10,950 BCE. That is within the margin of error for the date of the Younger Dryas impact event. The cosmic catastrophe that, according to a peer-reviewed study published in 2018 and supported by over 50 scientists across 6 countries, struck the Earth approximately 12,800 years ago. The comet impact that may have ended the previous world. Pillar 43 may be a record of that event, a memorial carved in stone by survivors who watched fire rain from the sky and wanted to make sure whoever came after them would know what happened. But here's what nobody mentions. To encode astronomical data in stone at that level of precision, you need to know the astronomy first. You need to be able to calculate star positions on specific dates. You need to understand the precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis that slowly shifts which stars appear where in the sky. The Sumerians, who came 7,000 years after Göbekli Tepe, understood the precession of the equinoxes. We know this from their texts, but understanding a 26,000-year cycle requires continuous astronomical observation over centuries at minimum. Who was observing the sky in the centuries before Göbekli Tepe? We don't know, because according to the official timeline, nobody sophisticated enough to do that existed. Then, there are the enclosures themselves. Göbekli Tepe has at least 20 enclosures confirmed by ground-penetrating radar, with more likely beneath the unexcavated sections. Each enclosure is a precise circle or oval of standing pillars surrounding the central pair. The circles are not approximate. They are geometrically accurate to a degree that implies measurement tools and a working knowledge of geometry. Geometry that was not supposed to exist for another 7,000 years. In 2020, researcher Giulio Magli of the Politecnico di Milano showed that 3 of the main enclosures at Göbekli Tepe are aligned with the rising point of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, as it appeared around 9,100 BCE. Not roughly aligned. Precisely aligned. You cannot accidentally align 3 separate stone circles with the rising point of a specific star. You do that on purpose, with calculation, with intention, with knowledge. Here is the detail that keeps serious researchers awake. Göbekli Tepe was not abandoned. It was not destroyed by an earthquake or a flood or an invading army. It was deliberately, carefully, methodically buried. Someone filled in every enclosure with thousands of tons of soil, animal bones, flint tools, and stone debris. The fill was compacted in layers. The process took time and effort comparable to the original construction. They buried their own monument. Why? Mainstream archaeology offers 2 theories. First, it was a ritual closing, a deliberate sealing of a sacred space once its purpose was fulfilled. Second, the burial was meant to preserve and protect the site for future generations. Both of those theories require the builders to have had a reason sophisticated enough to justify years of backbreaking work to undo what they had built. Neither theory explains what that reason was. But here is what the deliberate burial did accomplish. It preserved the site perfectly. The soil protected the carvings from erosion. The organic material in the fill gave archaeologists precise carbon dating. The layered compaction made it immediately obvious that the burial was intentional. It is almost as if someone who understood what archaeologists would need thousands of years in the future prepared the site for us to find. That thought is not comfortable, but it is not dismissible. Klaus Schmidt said before his death that the deliberate burial was the most important and least understood aspect of Göbekli Tepe. He believed it was done with intention, with knowledge of what would come after. He died in 2014 without publishing his final conclusions. His notes have not been made fully available to the academic community. Here is what changes the entire equation. If Göbekli Tepe were unique, you could argue it was a local anomaly. One extraordinary site produced by one extraordinary group of people. The problem is, it isn't unique. In 2021, archaeologists in northwestern Saudi Arabia discovered a complex of stone structures called mustatils. Rectangular stone platforms connected by walls stretching for up to 600 meters. Carbon dating placed their construction at 7,000 years ago. Thousands of them, spread across the 200,000 square kilometers. Built by people who, according to the standard timeline, were barely past the Stone Age. In Indonesia, a site called Gunung Padang has been ground-penetrating radar surveyed to reveal a massive structure beneath the visible surface. Carbon dating of organic material from the deepest layer produced dates of 25,000 to 14,000 years ago. The Indonesian government funded the research and then stopped it. The lead geologist, Danny Hilman Natawijaja, watched his permits get cancelled and his funding disappear after publishing his initial findings. In Bolivia, Tiwanaku contains megalithic stonework, the H-blocks of Pumapunku, machined to tolerances of fractions of a millimeter. Identical pieces that interlock like industrial components. The Andean civilization that supposedly built them had no metal tools capable of achieving that precision. In Egypt, the Sphinx enclosure shows water erosion, vertical channels cut by sustained rainfall, that geologist Robert Schoch has argued requires thousands of years of rainfall that Egypt hasn't received since at least 7,000 BCE. The Sphinx is older than we're told. The pattern is this. On every continent, in multiple ocean regions, there are structures that cannot be explained by the civilizations that supposedly built them, or that predate any known civilization at all. These structures share specific characteristics. Massive stones, moved and placed with a precision that challenges modern engineers. Astronomical alignments of extraordinary accuracy, geometric layouts that encode mathematical relationships, and deliberate longevity. They were built to last. Someone built all of this, across the entire planet. Before the civilization we know about, the simplest explanation for a global pattern is a global cause. Why don't you know about this? Not because the evidence doesn't exist. Every anomaly I've described is documented in peer-reviewed journals. The Edinburgh University astronomical analysis of Göbekli Tepe's pillar carvings was published in Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry. The ground-penetrating radar surveys at Gunung Padang were published in Archaeological Prospection. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis has been signed by 50 scientists across 6 countries and published repeatedly. The evidence is there. It simply never reaches the consensus. And there is a reason for that. Klaus Schmidt excavated Göbekli Tepe for 20 years. He gave interviews, published papers, and presented at conferences. But in those 20 years, he never published his full interpretation of what the site meant. He said repeatedly that he believed Göbekli Tepe represented a civilization we don't have a name for yet. A pre-agricultural, pre-ceramic, pre-everything society capable of monumental architecture, astronomical calculation, and organized religion. He died of a heart attack in 2014. He was 61. His unpublished work has been referenced but not released. Robert Schoch published his water erosion findings about the Sphinx in 1991. The geological evidence was solid. Other geologists confirmed the water erosion patterns. The academic response from Egyptology was not to address the geology. It was to question his right to have an opinion about archaeology. He has been excluded from major Egyptological conferences for 30 years. His geology has never been refuted. It has simply been ignored. Danny Hilman Natawijaja spent years surveying Gunung Padang with official Indonesian government support. When his dating results came back, government funding disappeared. Excavation permits were revoked. A committee was convened to review his methodology. The committee included no geologists. The pattern is identical in every case. The evidence is not refuted. The person is isolated. The funding disappears. The permits are cancelled. Evidence that contradicts the timeline is not dangerous because it is wrong. It is dangerous because it is right. And if it is right, then the institutions that have built their authority on the existing timeline, universities, museums, government antiquities departments, have been wrong for a very long time. Institutions do not admit that easily. So let's ask the question that mainstream archaeology refuses to put in print. Who built Göbekli Tepe? The official answer is Neolithic hunter-gatherers. But let's examine what that answer actually requires. It requires a group of nomadic people who had no permanent home, no stored food supply, no writing, no metal tools, and no known cultural tradition of monumental architecture, to have spontaneously developed the social organization, the engineering knowledge, the geometric precision, and the astronomical expertise required to build a complex of 200 stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons each. And then to have buried it all with equal precision and walked away. Let me offer a different model. The Younger Dryas impact event struck Earth 12,800 years ago. The evidence for this is growing and is now published in peer-reviewed geology journals. It triggered massive wildfires, rapid climate change, and catastrophic flooding as ice sheets collapsed. It ended the Pleistocene in a matter of decades. Before that event, the Earth's coastal regions, now underwater, were the most habitable land on the planet. Low elevation, temperate, rich in resources, sea levels 120 meters lower than today meant that the continental shelves were dry land. If an advanced civilization existed before 12,800 years ago, it would have been coastal, and it is now underwater. We are not looking for it because we are not looking where it would be. Göbekli Tepe is 11,600 years old. That is 1,200 years after the impact event. It was built by survivors, people who remembered what existed before, who carried astronomical knowledge, geometric knowledge, engineering knowledge, because they had inherited it from a civilization that was destroyed. Who built Göbekli Tepe not as a beginning but as a memorial, a record, a message carved in the hardest material they could find and then buried to protect it, a message to whoever came after. We are whoever came after, and we are only now beginning to read it. Göbekli Tepe is not mysterious because we lack the intelligence to understand it. It is mysterious because understanding it requires accepting that the timeline we were taught is wrong, that human history is older, stranger, and more tragic than any institution is prepared to admit. That before Egypt, before Sumer, before anything we call civilization, there was something else. Something that understood the stars well enough to encode their positions in stone. Something that moved 20-ton rocks with precision. Something that knew, when it built this place, that it was building it for the future. For us. They buried it, so it would survive. It survived. We found it. The question is whether we're ready to understand what it's telling us. Schmidt said it changes everything. He was right. We just haven't let it yet. Subscribe. Because next week I'm going into the underwater structures off the coast of Japan that predate Göbekli Tepe by 3,000 years, mapped, photographed, and officially classified as a natural geological formation despite the fact that they contain right angles. Nature doesn't make right angles. The video is on screen. Click it. I'll see you in the next one.